Welcome to the Two Gurus Talk Compliance podcast with me, Kristy Grant-Hart. I'm here with the one and only Tom Fox. This week, we're covering the potential banning of TikTok, the SEC's settlement with two firms over AI washing, the rebirth of the corporate sustainability due diligence directive, and whether your car is betraying you by sending data to make your insurance bills go up. But first, Tom, how has your week been? What is the most interesting development?
Well, the most interesting development will happen tomorrow when my wife and I are going to the Astros season opener.
Ooh, fun. That's awesome. I hope you have a great time.
We will. We love opening day. I think this is like our 10th straight. So kind of a tradition.
Fabulous. I love that. So we're going to start with Tesla, which has been a through line for the last several of these. Let's begin. What's going on now?
Well, it's almost hard to pick one story because there's so many, but the one that struck me that I wanted to maybe visit with you about is Elizabeth Warren has asked or even urged the SEC to investigate Tesla over board independence. This is a topic, that we have talked about on this podcast. And now we have a U.S. Senator getting involved. It really speaks, Kristy, I think, to the lack of board control or even oversight over Tesla. It's pretty clearly it's run directly by Elon Musk, and he pays an almost obscene amount of money to people on the board to keep them there to do what he wants. And you can do that if you're a private company, but if you're a U.S. public company, the board has a different obligation, and that's to the shareholders. And it's not clear whether the shareholders' interest is being put first. And certainly the Delaware Court of Chancery didn't think so around the $65 billion pay package granted that to Elon Musk by the board of directors that the Court of Chancery nullified. So corporate governance is not something we directly tackle all the time in compliance. We obviously touch on it. You do a lot of work in that sphere with boards directly, but corporate governance for a U.S. public company is paramount, and that's what the regulators are going to start to look at, and I'm not sure it's going to withstand SEC or other scrutiny.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting also that she pointed out that there was a conflict of interest potentially between Tesla advertising on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. I was recommended a book that I just finished, Tom, called Extremely Hardcore, which is the chronicle of Musk's purchase of Twitter from the beginning to the end of 2023. So it will not surprise you that he guts the entire compliance and safety team, even though they're under an FTC order, and then predictably runs into huge problems with compliance and safety. So I think that's just kind of how he is. He just doesn't believe in rules. Do you think the SEC will, in fact, open an investigation, the one that Senator Warren is calling for?
Well, according to our good friend, Professor Karen Woody, there's an entire Elon Musk section at the SEC. The thing that struck me also about this was, I don't know if you recall, but under the Trump administration, the SEC had an enforcement action against Tesla. And the then SEC Chairman Jay Clayton said it would hurt Tesla more for the SEC to enforce SEC rules and regulations against the company if they got rid of Elon Musk. I'm a big believer that no one is irreplaceable to start with, but it may be time for him to move off the CEO position. The company is incredibly profitable. I think it's pretty well run, although there's a lot of problems, at least in the litigation and regulatory realm. But the processes and procedures and policies are in place that I think someone else could come in and run Tesla effectively. It's really not, he's the founder. And we've seen numerous times where a founder of a very successful startup, the skills that they brought as the founder are not the skills they need to take a company into its more mature second phase. And I think Tesla might want to consider that. And this time around, perhaps under the current SEC chair, Gary Gensler, or a subsequent chair, if there's a second Biden administration, we might see a different ruling than we saw from Jay Clayton.
It would be really interesting to watch. Well, From one platform to another in the social media space, let's talk about TikTok. So, Tom, do you use TikTok?
No.
I did not think so. But even if you did, you might soon not be able to do so. So, my first article comes from the Wall Street Journal, and it's titled TikTok's Fate Now Hinges on Senate. So recently, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill that would ban TikTok from operating in the United States or force the sale of the U.S. parts of the popular social media app. Why? Because the intelligence community is deeply concerned about the Chinese company's ability to access massive amounts of U.S. citizens' personal data. So the article reports that the senators of both parties are concerned about protecting national security and have concerns about the potential for Chinese propaganda affecting U.S. public opinion and, of course, the election. So I was surprised to learn that the bill had passed in the House in such a highly bipartisan way, with 352 in favor and only 62 against. The senators are less favorable to the legislation than the House or President Biden, who said he would sign it. The senators are concerned about forcing the sale of a private company and about the free speech implications of that. So if the bill passes, ByteDance, which is the company that owns TikTok, would have 6 months to sell its U.S. operations or face a ban, which I can't even imagine how that would work in the United States, but okay. Estimates of the cost of buying TikTok's U.S. operations start at a cool $100 billion. So, Tom, we have clients that ban TikTok on their company-owned phones and some that have policies requiring employees not download TikTok if their work email or any other work-related material is accessible on their phone. Do you think that there are compliance risks in using TikTok? And what do you think will happen with this bill?
Kristy, I've really come around to the view that the data collected in its massive amounts of personal, identifiable data, PIP data, are collected by TikTok. And this is run by the Chinese government. There's no way, shape, or form to claim that they're separate in any way. And so that's concerning to me. And I am sensitive to the ubiquitousness of TikTok. But if it can't be American owned, or at least not owned by the Chinese government, who's the ultimate owner of this product, I think it's a national security risk. And it's not going to be tomorrow, may not be in 5 years, but they're collecting data, and that data is going to be used against us in the coming conflict with China. I don't have an opinion yet as to whether the U.S. can force a sale, perhaps under national security reasons. That can be done by Congress. It would be a massive effort to do so. It would take away millions of users' ability, but I can't believe some other platform can't come along and take those users. But I think it really is a national security issue, and perhaps surprisingly to most, I think that it's a step that the U.S. government's going to have to take. I don't know why the Senate is so reluctant. As you noted correctly, this had wide bipartisan support in the House. It wasn't a witch hunt. And I think people see this really for what it is. And I've got several good friends who are in compliance at TikTok, and some I've worked with, and they're people I very much respect. But I think at the end of the day, the Chinese government is collecting all of this information. And that's, given the current level of either potential conflict or at least very intense competition, I don't think that's something American citizens should be giving up to the Chinese government.
Oh, man. I mean, the uproar that would show up if the government takes away TikTok from the millions and millions of users. That would be ugly. It'd be ugly and maybe necessary. I'm not sure, but it definitely would be ugly. So let's hope that this thing resolves itself without quite so much interaction with the government. Maybe they'll just decide it's a better idea to just sell it. Speaking of governments in other parts of the world, Tom, why are we talking about 1MDB again?
Because it's the case that never ends. Never, never, never. We don't have children, but if we did, they'd be talking about it. Maybe my granddaughter will be talking about it if I ever have a granddaughter or a grandson. But the reason I selected this, Kristy, is I really wanted to get your thoughts and opinion on Goldman Sachs suing the Malaysian government over its settlement around its actions in 1MDB. Goldman, at one point, had the largest FCPA fine in the history of the world ever over this. That's now been exceeded, but it's still somewhere around $3 billion. And massive fraud or corruption by Goldman. The lead Goldman managing director or partner, Timothy Leisner, pled guilty. Roger Ng was found guilty. His associate is under him or worked under him in this bribery and corruption scheme. And Goldman engaged in a wide variety of settlements, including with the U.S. government, including with the government of Malaysia, over the money that was essentially stolen from the people of Malaysia. But here's the thing that I don't understand. Goldman suing the Malaysian government because the Malaysian government correctly said in their first press release, oh, we'll just reopen the settlement. Guess what? $6 billion in settlement. Maybe we can get a little bit more. And it either is incredibly toxic relationship between the parties, but to reopen the settlement, not by the other side filing a lawsuit, but by you filing a lawsuit, just seems to me to be an inane strategy. Goldman has got to get past this. And frankly, whatever they have to do to get past this, they have to do. They are the deepest pocket. They are, other than J-Lo and the former Prime Minister of Malaysia, number 3 for most culpable. And I just cannot understand this as a litigation strategy. I'm a former litigator, and I still don't see it as a litigation strategy. So that's why I really wanted to bring this up, because it just seems to me to be, as I would say, curiouser and curiouser.
Just to make sure that we're clear, we're not talking about J-Lo, the pop singer, right? We're talking about different J-Lo.
Not Jenny from the neighborhood.
Not Jenny from the block. Okay. I wanted to be very clear. We are not calling her into question here. So this is just weird all over the place, Tom. When I read it, I had to read it twice because I was trying to figure out who's suing who. I mean, it's in the UK arbitration court, I believe, too, right? So
right.
It's what? How is this? Where? Why? Look, I don't understand it either. And honestly, I mean, I would assume that there's some sort of, it's the wrong term of art, but some sort of double jeopardy, or this has already been decided. Why is this being reopened? Why would you even allow it to be reopened? I don't know. It doesn't seem to me that this is going to go anywhere good. I haven't looked far enough into it to understand where the standing is or why it's in the UK, or if the arbitrator has to decide whether or not this can even go forward. But it is a very peculiar thing to do. And I agree with you. I think putting it to bed is the best answer, and the best way that they can stop people talking about it at the very least.
Well, Kristy, the EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. Do we have new breaths of life?
Oh my, Tom, you saw 2 or 4 weeks ago, whatever it was, that I was a sad panda because the CSDDD, as it's frequently known, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, was labeled as dead in the press, and there's good reason for that. After this wonderful fast tracking in December of this very compliance-friendly regulation or a directive, the Germans decided maybe we don't like this so much. So they had their own, obviously, supply chain act. They were concerned about the cost for small and medium businesses. And they said, you know what, I'm just not so into this anymore. And a whole bunch of other countries said, yeah, no, me neither. So it was dead in the water. But over the past couple of weeks, Germany negotiated a somewhat watered down version, but still very much alive, CSDDD, setting it up for success in what will be the final chamber review. So the new CSDDD applies to companies meeting a higher financial threshold. So fewer companies will be caught by it, and employees count needs to be higher than in the original text. The timeline was pushed out as well. So the first reports won't show up until 2027. But the good news for compliance officers is the penalties for non-compliance remain very high. So for instance, the law will keep that private right of action, meaning people who are affected by negligent companies that didn't do good due diligence can sue for financial penalties. And we also have government fines, wait for it, up to 5% of the organization's net worldwide turnover. So, this CS Tom, I kept coming up with the classic sort of Monty Python line, I'm not dead yet. Um, and I was remembering just how huge a deal it was when the EU's General Data Protection Regulation threatened 4% of worldwide turnover. This one is larger, 5%. How do you think this is going to affect companies, Tom?
Well, I think all of the things we talked about before, reports of its death were greatly exaggerated, are going to become true. I guess, Christy, what I saw in this law was really things you should be doing anyway from a business perspective. You should know who's in your supply chain. You should be asking those questions of your suppliers. The more visibility you have into the supply chain, the better run your company will be. But equally important, the less chance you'll get into trouble. Uh, you really do want to know. We laughed about, I think it was Porsche and a couple of other Maserati
It's
and
Bentley and
one,
Audi and
yeah,
VW. Mhm.
where it turned out that they had Uyghur forced labor made supply of parts in their supply chain. And that was something that caught them by surprise. The regulations changed and they didn't know who was in their supply chain. Well, they really should have known that to start with so they could have responded when the regs changed much more expeditiously and would not have had to lose exports. And if something's bad enough, it's going to get into the court of public opinion where the real damage will come. Um, Maybe even on TikTok. We can get it compliance from both angles there. But, this is welcome, I think, for every compliance professional. It's things that I think every corporation should be doing. So I welcome this coming back and not being dead.
I am an excited person. This is going to be terrific for compliance officers and really move the bar on those due diligence requirements in a big way. All righty. Mike Lynch, your favorite.
One more story that will never, ever, ever go away. The sad saga of the HP acquisition of autonomy continues in a San Francisco courtroom where former CEO of Autonomy, Mike Lynch, is on trial, criminal trial, for his alleged fraud in bumping up the numbers of autonomy to entice HP to purchase it. This was for actions, I think, in 2012. HP, to recap, purchased autonomy for $11.1 billion. 18 months later, wrote off that investment to the tune of $8.8 billion. I took a deep dive into this way back when, and HP made about every mistake they could have made in the acquisition process. One of those mistakes, however, was not that they didn't know what they were buying. They went into this eyes open, and the CFO of HP said, if we do this may bankrupt HP. Well, that's what it almost did. Now, that doesn't absolve Mike Lynch or Autonomy for the games they were playing. They were, took a playbook from Enron and only improved upon it in terms of stuffing the channel and other well-known phrases in the software world to jack their numbers up. So there was fraud, or there at least were puffed up numbers. But I think HP either did or should have discovered those. But I guess if you engage in the fraud, it doesn't really matter what the impact is, as we learned from Donald Trump, New York civil action by the Attorney General. Mike Lynch has fought and fought and fought extradition to the United States. He has, however, been civilly sued in the United Kingdom, in London, where he lost. And there's no quantum award yet, but a liability finding was made against him on the civil side, much to my utter shock. And now he's in the United States on trial for not for his life, but certainly for his freedom. The CFO of Autonomy went to trial several years ago and was found guilty, and I would think he was given a 5-year sentence. So I can't imagine Mike Lynch is going to skate on this particularly in HP's backyard of
Mhm.
San Francisco, in U.S. Federal District Court. And I think he's looking at an equally long prison sentence as well. But as with one MDB, it is the scandal that has yet to show us any flickers of dying.
So, Tom, this article really was focused on the pretrial admissibility of certain pieces of evidence and what was going to come in. And there's some pretty great things here. For instance, the fact that they are not going to allow in the fact that he had a tank full of piranhas as part of the entranceway to the company. I am planning now on getting a piranha tank here at Spark Compliance. It will not be admissible against me in court. So that's an excellent thing. But you know what is really even an even worse idea than a tank full of piranhas for people walking into your office is taking the stand in your own defense. And it appears that he is planning on taking the stand. Has he learned nothing from our friend Sam Bankman-Fried? This is a bad idea.
Yep. Well, that's why sociopaths are sociopaths. They take the stand in their own defense and get hammered by the 12 good men and women on the jury.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we have some other good people amongst our ranks, and those are chief compliance officers. So there is a new survey out that Matt Kelly covered in his fabulous Radical Compliance blog, which is titled Survey CCO Resources Pressures Both Rising. So in the article, he reviews the high and low points of a recent survey of over 700 chief compliance officers that was performed by KPMG. So amazingly, 72% of the respondents said that they expect to hire more staff this year, which is great. And only 2% said they thought their headcount was going to go down. Also in good news, 70% expected increases in their technology budgets, up to 5 to 10% on average. And what are they going to spend all this tech budget on? I was surprised by this. Better training topped the list, with fully half of respondents putting their money there. Now, when it comes to pressure to have a great program, certainly compliance officers are feeling it, with 84% of respondents saying that they expect increasing regulatory expectations and scrutiny in the next 2 years, which does make me wonder, Tom, what are the other 16% thinking? And they are clearly not listening to our podcast, because if they were, they would fully expect that regulatory scrutiny that is continuing to come. Surprisingly, the chief compliance officers feel the most pressure from their customers. So 68% said they feel pressure to enhance their compliance programs from their customers, while only 62% said they also feel that from regulators, or solely feel that from regulators. So I think that there's lots of good news in here. But I'm just fascinated that such a high percentage of chief compliance officers reported feeling pressure to have enhanced programs from their customers. Now, we've always envisioned a world, Tom, where there is the business driving compliance rather than just the fear of prosecution. Do you think we've reached that tipping point in some way?
I think we may have. And I not only welcome it, I applaud it. I think it's great. It shows, number one, the business understands the need for compliance. But Kristy, the thing that really excites me, I think it shows that compliance, properly understood, can actually enhance business efficiency and lead to greater profitability if you have effective compliance program. So I welcome that, particularly around data analytics and other drivers that can provide insights, which can create, as I said, business efficiencies, or perhaps even more efficient internal controls. So I think it's a great finding, and I hope we're at that tipping point. I've been talking about operationalization of compliance for a long time, and the business reasons and aspects of compliance. So I say go forth and conquer.
I agree. I think also the CSRD in Europe and the CSDDD for our acronym loving friends is driving this as well. We're realizing that the disclosure obligations are going to exist between companies. So you have to have a decent program to make it easier for your customers and clients to do their disclosures. That really is creating this sort of beneficial circle that's going to be great for all of us.
Well, you want to talk about AI
Of
washing?
course, I want to talk about AI washing. This one is great. Please tell us about it.
So the SEC brought its first 2 enforcement actions against AI washing. Matt Kelly is not really enamored with that phrase, but I kind of like it. It comes, of course, from greenwashing, where companies claim they're green and they're really not. Well, AI washing is basically the same thing. Here we had two investment advisors, Delphia and Global Predictions, claiming that their AI enhanced services would help you pick better stocks. Well, turns out that was all just hot air. The bottom line is, Kristy, if you're a regulated industry and you say you've got an ability or a tool and you don't, that's a violation of the regulations. Here it was financial advisors, but the same would hold true for a bank, for a financial services company. And I think the same will hold true for a public company regulated by the SEC as well. If you make a claim publicly and that claim is not true, you're subject to SEC regulation, enforcement, fine, and penalty if the SEC has jurisdiction. I think it's really just an extension of what we saw in greenwashing, but it's really a basic extension of a pump and dump scheme from the 90s or the 1930s. If you say you have this ability and you don't, that's a securities law violation, and companies need to be careful around that. The fines were relatively small, but I think it's a great first step by the SEC, and I think we'll see more of it going forward. What kind of caught your peak?
Well, in terms of the word AI washing, at least it's not AI gate. I feel like gates are maybe even more problematic than washing. You know,
There you go.
we have both of those. I thought this one was actually really fun, Tom, in some ways, because I love that one of them got in trouble for claiming to be, and it's a quote, first regulated AI financial advisor, unquote. Well, they definitely found out that they were regulated by the fact that they had this prosecution against them, or this come against them. I think that it's useful that they brought this so quickly, frankly. I think that we are in this era where every single conference I go to has 30 sessions, it feels like, on AI. And that the SEC putting a stake in the ground early is useful. And I think a really good message to people to be very careful, frankly, about what they say. So
So
let's,
more data privacy, TikTok-ish. What are you thinking?
it's a Tom, do you think that your car shares data with the insurance company that you hire, that you choose?
Well, I'm actually conspiracy Tom, so I think everybody's watching me. I think the government's watching me. The COVID vaccine, I don't know what's inside my head, but yeah, they're watching me. They're taking it. They're using it. All those cameras, sure.
Okay, well, you are probably correct in some way, shape, or form, at least according to an article from the WGRZ. It's titled Data Sharing Causes Concern for Drivers, with more and more drivers finding out that they accidentally or purposefully, who knows, opted into data sharing with aggregators that then share that data with insurance companies. So when did they do that? Well, obviously, in the fine print in the contracts they signed. So this article actually cites a story in the New York Times that highlighted a number of drivers who reported that their insurance rates went up despite having clean driving records. Now, how did this happen? Well, it turns out their data was being shared with data brokers, and then the insurance companies were buying that data. That data included data on when they were speeding, how many times they were hard braking, when they had sharp acceleration. I would be guilty of that in our little convertible that I love so much. And that this insurance data was being shared and then used by the insurance companies to quantify risk. So programs like OnStar will track your driving if you opt into the Smart Driver program. You've been warned. So look, I know that the answer to this question is consent, but how is this legal? I mean, in law school, I suppose we would call these terms an adhesion contract. I mean, good luck with getting to OnStar and changing its terms and conditions for you in that contract you had to sign that you didn't read. Uh, there are people who are saying they're going to make privacy laws about this and take it to the legislature. Do you think there'll be any kind of blowback from this, Tom?
Well, now that I have the visual of you driving an MG convertible with that mane of red hair dancing in the wind, this whole podcast was worth it just for that. So, for our listeners out there, but yeah, maybe this is a violation of the California Consumer Privacy Act. Maybe, if you're right, there was probably consent, but wasn't informed consent. The collection of data by OnStar does not offend me one iota. The collection of data by OnStar selling to data aggregators who can sell it to anybody, that's probably a step too far. And you're right, everybody's probably signed away their rights, but it sure wasn't informed consent. And whether the U- U.S. Congress or a state legislature would take action, um, as I guess it's an open question, but I think this is exactly the kind of direction we're heading, where all of our data is going to be collected, sold to an aggregator who's going to resell it to a wide variety of end users who are going to use it nefariously or other.
Yeah. It's one of those future states that is a little bit concerning that I think that the comprehensive privacy laws are trying to avoid in terms of do not sell my data, et cetera. But, those can be overridden with consent. So stay tuned and see what happens there.
Kristy, next up, a story that, and I really wanted to put this story out here to get your opinion on this as much as any other reason. And the story comes to us from Bloomberg, which says Adani Green, the energy concern, has said it has not received a notice from the Department of Justice that is under an FCPA investigation. Now, why I think this is strange is there is an investigation of potential FCPA violations by an unrelated third party. That unrelated third party is not named in this article, but it's pretty clear Adani Green knows who this unrelated third party is. But Adani Green says they have no business relationship with this unrelated third party. So what's curious to me about this is if I got this kind of information from JP Morgan, if I got it from a newspaper article, if I had a third party who either disclosed to me they were under investigation or I became aware of it, I would do an internal investigation to see if my company had anything to worry about. And I wouldn't be sitting around waiting for the Department of Justice to notify me that due to information received from a, quote, unrelated third party, end quote, that had led to questions about my company. I would want to get ahead of this. And it just seemed to me this is the wrong approach for Adani Green to take. They could have come out and said, we're aware of these allegations. We have thoroughly investigated. Our internal investigation shows we had no relationship. We weren't involved, something to affirmatively avow they had not engaged in any corruption or compliance violations. So once again, it was a very curious story for me about perhaps a misstep and even a significant misstep in corporate governance.
My biggest question is why they said anything. I mean, to a certain degree, if they go out and say, we've done this internal investigation and we know that nothing has gone wrong. Okay, what if they're wrong about that too? What if they didn't do a very good investigation or they didn't find everything and now they're backpedaling? At JP Morgan coming out and saying, we don't think that there's anything going on here either was very peculiar to me because unless everybody is dead certain about this stuff, it just seems very, very odd to me to be talking about it at all instead of just saying, we will fully cooperate with whatever the Department of Justice wants or says, and leaving it at that so that there isn't this sort of record or, discussion in the press. I found it all very curious. Tom, what do you think the benefit is? Why would they go out and start talking about this?
I don't know. This one really befuddles me.
Yeah. Okay. So do you know what else befuddles me, Tom, on a regular basis?
Florida man?
Our friend Florida man. All right. So this time, Tom, it's perfect. It's Florida man time. We're taking, this Florida man is taking advantage of the beautiful Florida beaches. Who can blame him? His name is Jason Brzezkiewicz. So we're just going to call him Jason because I don't want to try that again. He was arrested.
Well done.
Thank you very much. He was arrested recently after he drove around a closed gate and accessed the beach without paying a toll. So the beach was closed because it was high tide. This did not stop Florida man Jason. He took his white pickup truck and drove it into the ocean. When he was arrested, he told deputies that he just wanted to go surfing. He then told the deputies, quote, "It's not my fault the truck don't surf," unquote. So one of the deputies was heard on camera saying, "That's fantastic. That'll make our Facebook page today." Jason was taken to jail with a $200 bond. His good-for-nothing, non-surfing truck was towed away.
Well, first of all, I hope this shows up on TikTok because yet another compliance angle for TikTok. Two, was he able to post a $200 bond?
I mean, I would
Any
hope
word on
so.
that?
I would
Maybe,
really
maybe
hope
not.
so.
He's Florida man.
I mean, he could have sold his non-surfing truck, but then again, who would want a non-surfing truck? We all only want trucks that know how to surf.
Exactly. Well, some great stories today. I hope our listeners enjoyed listening to us as much as we enjoyed recording this. And I'm Tom Fox.
I'm Kristy Grant-Hart. Until next time, take care.